Hello. My name is Torbjörn Andersson, and I'm the Dean of the Law Faculty here in Uppsala. And I welcome you all, very many people. I've been in this place on a number of occasions. I've never seen such a commotion at an entrance. Most of all, I'd like to welcome, of course, Shirin, who will later take the floor. I will also say that after this short welcome speech, which I'm about to conclude right now, there will be the Västgöta Nationskapell, that is the sort of choir of the Västgöta nation, a students' nation in Uppsala. It means they sing. And after that, I'm the Dean of the Law Faculty. That means, for you who's not from the academy, that means that I'm the boss of the Law Faculty. After the choir, it's the Vice Rector of the Humanities and Social Sciences in Uppsala, Margareta Fahlgren. A Vice Rector means that she's the boss of the bosses. She's the boss of the deans. And eventually, there will be Shirin Ebadi, the woman who don't like bosses. And I guess she will speak about that. Now I'll leave the floor to the Västgöta nation.
Hustrun skrå, in den unge It is indeed a great honor to welcome Shirin Ebadi, the 2003 Nobel Peace Prize winner, to Uppsala University. Shirin Ebadi is a great example to all of us in her relentless work to defend human rights, and especially the rights of women, children, and refugees. And she has shown an immense courage and strength in her work as a judge, lawyer, internationally recognized advocate for human rights, and professor, and her work is of utmost importance. And she has recently joined the international jury for the Harald Edelstam Prize, a Swedish initiative to recognize persons who have shown civil courage. And we're very happy to have Shirin Ebadi on this jury, where the prize will be given for the first time in 2012. Human rights is, of course, an immense area and of great importance at Uppsala University in research and teaching. And I can mention a few areas in peace and conflict studies, in law, and in political science, where we study human rights. And for us, Shirin Ebadi shows us how ideas and theories are put into action in her tireless work for human rights. And we are very much looking forward to hearing you speak about your work and all the effort you have made to promote human rights worldwide. So I won't speak any longer, but the floor is yours, and you're most welcome to speak here. So the floor is yours, Shirin Ebadi. Welcome.
خانم ها و آقایان، شب شما خوش. بسیار خوشحالم که توانستم امشب در دانشگاه اوبسالا که یکی از مهمترین دانشگاه‌های اروپا است با شما صحبت کنم.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening to you all. I'm very happy to be able and to have this opportunity to speak with you and address you at Uppsala University, which is one of the most important and oldest universities in Sweden.
تعداد زیادی از جوانان ما در این دانشگاه تحصیل کردند قبلا و الان هم مشغول تحصیل هستند. از اینکه سخاوتمندانه علم خود را با هموطنان من تقسیم کردید سپاسگزارم.
There are many of my compatriots who have studied and many who are currently studying at your university. I am very grateful to you for having shown your generosity to my compatriots to study here.
همچنین تعدادی از بهترین اساتید ایرانی در این دانشگاه تدریس می‌کنند که این نشانه روابط عمیق فرهنگی بین دو ملت ایران و سوئده.
And there are also some Iranian lecturers who are at this university, and they're lecturing, which demonstrates the very profound relationship between the peoples of Iran and Sweden.
دوستان ارجمند، به مناسبت وقایع که در خاورمیانه و در شمال آفریقا اتفاق افتاده، امشب مایلم کمی با شما در این خصوص صحبت کنم.
Friends, I would like to speak with you tonight about the recent developments in the Middle East and in North Africa.
مدتی است که در مطبوعات غربی صحبت از بهار اعراب میشه و به نظر من هنوز زوده که این اصطلاح را به کار ببریم، برای اینکه کافی نیست که یک رژیم دیکتاتوری ساقط بشه.
For some time now in the Western media, they've been talking about the Arab Spring. In my opinion, it's still premature to call it an Arab Spring, because just the fact that a dictatorship is toppled doesn't mean that everything is fine.
مسئله مهم این است که بعد از یک رژیم دیکتاتوری دموکراسی در کشوری بیاید، یعنی مردم حاکم بر سرنوشت خود باشند.
What is important that a dictatorship should be followed by democratic rule. In other words, people should be able to determine their own fate.
و بدیهی است وقتی که صحبت از مردم می‌کنیم نمی‌توان نیمی از افراد یک جامعه یعنی زنان رو فراموش کنیم.
And naturally, when we talk about people in democracy, we should not forget 1/2 of the population, which is women.
هیچ حکومتی نمیتونه ادعای دموکرات بودن داشته باشه ولی نیمی از مردم جامعه رو از حقوق انسانی خودش محروم بکنه.
No government can claim to be democratic, yet at the same time deprive half its society of its rights.
با این مقدمه میخوام نگاهی کوتاه بیاندازم به کشورهایی که قیامهای مردمی در اون صورت گرفته.
So with this introduction, I want to follow with a quick glance at the countries where there have been popular uprisings.
در مصر گروه‌های مختلف اسلامی فعالن و سعی می‌کنن به تنهایی یا با ائتلاف با یکدیگر حکومت رو به دست بگیرن.
In Egypt, there are various Islamic groups, and some on their own, and some through a coalition. They are trying to take power in their hands.
اینا به تدریج شروع کردن صحبت از اجرای احکام شریعت و به طرفداران خودشون وعده اجرای اونا رو دادن.
They've started talking about implementing the Islamic Sharia law, and they have promised their supporters that they will make sure that Islamic law is established.
اینا میگفتن که چون حکومت حسنی مبارک مورد حمایت غرب بوده، قوانینش هم نشأت گرفته از فرهنگ غرب، بنابراین ما که جای اون آمدیم حالا میخوایم قوانین شریعت رو اجرا کنیم.
They claimed that because Hosni Mubarak was supported by the West, his rules were also Western rules, and they're saying now that we are coming to power, we want to make sure that we have the Sharia law.
معنای دیگر این حرف این است که حقوق زن رو به عقب‌تر خواهند برد.
Another meaning of what they're saying is that there will be a setback for women's rights.
برای اینکه برابری حقوق چیزی نیست که مخصوص غرب باشه، یک مفهوم انسانی است. در همه جای دنیا زن و مرد بایستی برابر باشند و وقتی یک حکومتی ادعا میکنه که برابری نشأت گرفته از غربه، یعنی در حقیقت میخواد حقوق زنان رو پایمال بکنه.
Equality is a human right, and it's universal, the gender equality between men and women. So if a government claims that equality for women, it emanates from the West, it is actually going against Islamic laws as well.
و این اتفاقی است که در سال 1979 در ایران افتاد.
And this is something that took place in Iran in 1979.
در اون سال رژیم دیکتاتوری شاه ساقط شد، ولی که ما شاهد بودیم که دموکراسی به ایران نیامد و به جای یه دیکتاتور سیاسی یه دیکتاتور مذهبی به کار آمد که بسیار سختگیرتر از اولی هم بود.
In 1979, the regime of the Shah was toppled, so one dictatorship was deposed, yet it was replaced with a theocracy, a dictatorship by religious people, and which came to power.
اولین کاری که حکومت جمهوری اسلامی کرد، یعنی در حالتی که فقط 4 ماه از انقلاب گذشته بود و هنوز ما پارلمان نداشتیم، قانون اساسی نداشتیم، در شورای انقلاب قوانینی تصویب شد که کلیه حقوقی که زنها هم در رژیم شاهنشاهی توانسته بودند به دست بیارن، اونا هم ازشون گرفت.
The first thing the Islamic regime did, in fact 4 months after it had come to power, was that before we even had a parliament or a constitution, was revised. The Revolution Council, they changed all the laws on women that had been endorsed under the Shah.
در مقابل اسلامی هایی که در مصر سعی میکنن به قدرت برسن، ارتش مصر قرار داره که مسئول حفظ انتظامات و اجرای انتخابات اونجاست.
In Egypt, before the Islamists take over, the Egyptian military has been in charge of law and order.
ارتش مصر هم متاسفانه اعتقادی به زن نداره، برای اینکه وقتی که زنها در میدان التحریر جمع شده بودن و اعتراض میکردن به عملکرد ارتش، دستور داد که از همه زنها معاینه بکارت بشود، برای اینکه ثابت بکند زنایی که با ارتش مخالفن یک عده افرادی هستند که تنفروشی حرفه اونهاست.
But sadly, the Egyptian military doesn't have a favorable view of women and women's rights either, because in Tahrir Square, when the women staged protests, the Egyptian military forced women to have virginity tests because they wanted to say that women who take part in such protests are loose women with no morality.
جامعه مدنی و انجمن‌های زنان در مصر به علت سالها اختناق و سرکوب متاسفانه ضعیفه و الان وظیفه جامعه بین‌المللی است که به کمک و به تقویت جامعه مدنی در مصر بپردازه و اینها رو در مقابل مرتجعین تقویت بکنه.
The civil society and women's societies in Egypt are sadly very weak, and the reason for that is years of suppression that they have endured. So it is now the duty of the international community to help them and to empower the civil society against these radical movements.
در تونس وضعیت کمی متفاوته و سابقه سکولاریسم در اونجا خیلی قدیمی تره.
The situation is different in Tunisia because they have a record of secularism which is stronger.
و امکان اینکه یک حکومت دموکرات در تونس سر کار بیاد خیلی زیاده.
And there is a stronger likelihood that a democratic government may take over the helm in Tunisia.
در کشورهای دیگه مثل لیبی، سوریه، یمن، بحرین مبارزه هنوز ادامه داره و مردم علیه دیکتاتورها قیام کردند.
The resistance continues in other countries such as Libya, Syria, Yemen and Bahrain, and they are trying to topple their dictators.
که ما خوشبختانه شاهد بودیم که یکی از برندگان جایزه صلح نوبل امسال یک زن فعال از یمن بود.
And we've had the fortune to witness that one of these female activists from Yemen has been one of the recipients of this year's Nobel Peace Prize.
من به برندگان صلح نوبل امسال تبریک میگم و همچنین به کمیته صلح نوبل به مناسبت چنین تصمیم درستی نیز تبریک میگم.
I would like here to congratulate the three ladies who were awarded the Nobel Peace Prize this year, and also congratulate the Nobel Peace Committee for having made that wise decision.
انتخاب این زنان در حقیقت این پیام مهم رو به همراه داشت که دموکراسی بدون دستیابی به حقوق برابر برای زنان امکان پذیر نیست.
This selection of the three women sent out a very important message that it is not possible to realize democracy unless the rights of women are respected as equals.
علت این که 2 زن از لیبریا انتخاب شده بودند و 1 زن از یمن این است که
The reason 2 women were chosen from Liberia and 1 from Yemen is
در لیبریا جامعه مدنی موفق شد زنان رو به حقوق حقه خودشون برسونه و به همین دلیل جامعه روی آرامش دید و لیبریا یکی از معدود کشورهای آفریقاست که در صلح و ثبات به سر میبره.
The reason the 2 women were chosen from Liberia is because these women helped the civil society to try and realize the just rights of the civil society, and hence their society went towards calm, and calm was established after many years in this African country.
و در حقیقت یمن و سایر کشورهایی که قیام‌های مردمی در اون صورت گرفته باید نگاه کنن به لیبریا و ببینن که چگونه عمل کردند که جامعه به آرامش رسید.
So in fact, Yemen and other countries where uprisings have been staged should look to Liberia and see how in Liberia the civil society has managed to establish peace and calm.
متاسفانه در کشورهای عربی که قیام صورت گرفته همه صحبت از سیاست و انتخاباته و کسی صحبت از حقوق زن نمیکنه. کسی صحبت نمیکنه که اگر پیروز شدن آیا تعداد زوجات رو از بین خواهند برد یا نه.
Sadly, in these Arab countries where they have had uprisings, the focus seemed to be on politics, on elections, and no one is mentioning the rights of women. No one is asking questions such as, will polygamy continue to exist or not?
و در حقیقت در قوقای سیاست باز هم زنان فراموش شدند.
And in fact, in this process of politics, again, the rights of women have been neglected.
و این همان اشتباهی بود که در سال 1979 در ایران اتفاق افتاد.
Which was exactly the mistake that was made, the error that was committed in Iran in 1979.
و باعث شد که ظرف مدت کوتاهی استبداد مذهبی در ایران حکومت کنه.
And it caused a theocracy to become established in Iran for some time.
در حقیقت بهار عرب زمانی است که زنان عرب به برابری حقوق دست بیابند.
In fact, the Arab Spring will only be realized when Arab women realize full equality.
و کشورهای اسلامی که قیام کردند باید بدانند اگر مثل لیبریا نشوند تبدیل میشوند به ایران.
So these Arab countries that have staged uprisings, they must understand that if they don't become like Liberia, they will become like Iran.
و اما وضعیت حقوق بشر مگر در ایران چگونه است که من هشدار میدهم به کشورهای اسلامی که به ما نگاه کنید و شبیه سرنوشت ما برای خودتون رقم نزنید.
Now, how is the human rights situation in Iran that I'm warning these Arab countries to make sure that they don't have the same fate as Iran.
دولت ایران یکی از بزرگترین ناقضین حقوق بشر و به همین دلیل سازمان ملل متحد تصمیم گرفت برای ایران گزارشگر حقوق بشر تعیین کنه.
The government in Iran is one of the biggest violators of human rights, which is precisely why the United Nations has decided to appoint a special rapporteur on human rights for Iran.
غیر از ایران، کره شمالی هم گزارشگر داره و این نشان دهنده این است که این دو تا کشور از جهت نقض حقوق بشر در یک ردیف قرار گرفتن.
In addition to Iran, another country that has a UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights is North Korea, which demonstrate that these two countries have the violation of human rights in common.
ایران وطن اقوام مختلفی است مانند کرد، بلوچ، ترک، عرب زبان و لور.
Iran is a country that is made up of several ethnic minorities. There are Kurds, Baluchis, Turks, Arabs and Lurs.
متاسفانه با وجودی که در قانون اساسی نوشته شده که اقوام ایرانی می توانند زبان خودشون رو تدریس کنند در مدارسشون، 32 ساله که این حق از اونها ساقط شده.
Sadly, despite the fact that our constitution actually stipulates that these members of these ethnic minorities should be able to study their own languages in schools, for 32 years that has not happened. They've been deprived of that right.
و همچنین عملکرد حکومت با اقوام ما بسیار تبعیض‌آمیزه.
Moreover, the government's conduct towards these ethnic minorities has been very discriminatory.
من امروز به دیدن تعدادی از هموطنان کردمون در یکی از میدانهای استکهلم متحصن شده بودند رفتم و در اونجا شاهد بودم که عده‌ای که میخواستن پناهنده بشن و پناهندگی اینها هنوز قبول نشده و امکان دیپورت دارن متحصن شدن.
Earlier today, I went to the center of Stockholm and I met with a group of Iranian Kurdish asylum seekers whose application for asylum had been turned down and they had staged a hunger strike, and I was very saddened by their plight.
من از همه شما کمک می‌خواهم که هم به کردهای ایرانی و هم به همه سایر افرادی که از بقیه کشورها در اینجا پناهندگی می‌خواهند کمک کنید.
I appeal to all of you here to please help and assist not only these Iranian Kurds, but all these people from various parts of the world who are seeking asylum in your country.
مسلم بدانید تا وضعیت کسی در کشورش خطرناک و بد نباشه حاضر نمیشه خانه و کاشانه و بستگانش رو ترک بکنه و آواره کشورهای دیگه بشه.
You can rest assured that no one is going to to go to another country and seek asylum unless they feel that their life is in danger and they are in a very bad situation. Otherwise, they're unlikely to leave their homeland, their dear ones and their relatives.
دولت ایران با وجودی که کنوانسیون‌های حقوق بشر را پذیرفته ولیکن ما تبعیض بر اساس مذهب بسیار داریم.
Despite the fact that the Iranian government is a signatory to several human rights conventions, but sadly we have many cases of discrimination based on religion.
طبق قانون اساسی مذهب رسمی شیعه است، ولیکن گروه‌های دیگر اسلامی از جمله و همچنین مسیحی، زرتشتی و یهودی به رسمیت شناخته شدند.
Based on the Iranian constitution, the official religion in Iran is the Shiite faith, but it also officially recognizes other Muslim sects as well as Christianity, Zoroastrianism, and Judaism.
و حالا اینکه تعدادی از ایرانی‌ها بهایی هستند، حدود 300,000 بهایی در ایران زندگی می‌کنند که اینها از کلیه حقوق شهروندی محروم هستند، حتی از ابتدای انقلاب به این طرف نتوانستند به دانشگاه بروند.
Whereas we also have some 300,000 Baha'is who live in Iran, they have been deprived of all their civil rights. For instance, they are not even allowed to be admitted to university.
طبق قانون بین مسلمان‌ها و ادیانی که به رسمیت شناخته شده هم تبعیض هست.
Based on the Iranian law, there is also discrimination between Muslims and members of the recognized religions that I just named.
از جمله به موجب قانونی که بعد از انقلاب تصویب شد، اگر در بین ورثه متوفی فردی مسلمان باشه میتونه همه ارث رو ببره.
For instance, according to one of the laws that was adopted after the 1979 revolution, if a member of a family that is a non-Muslim family, if there is a Muslim member in that family, that member will inherit everything.
به عنوان مثال اگر یک یهودی ایرانی فوت بکنه و 3 تا پسر داشته باشه، خیلی طبیعی است که اموالش باید بین پسراش قسمت بشه. اما اگر یکی از بستگانش، فرضاً پسرداییش مسلمان شده باشه، همه ارث رو میبره و بچه‌ها چون بر دین پدر باقی مانده اند از ارث محروم میشن.
I'll give you an example. For instance, if a Jewish Iranian man has 3 sons, and if he passes away, instead of the money naturally going to the 3 sons, if there happens to be some distant cousin who had converted into Islam, that person will be the sole inheritor.
تغییر دین برای مسلمان ها در ایران ممنوعه و مجازات بسیار سنگینی در بر داره.
Muslims are banned from converting into other religions, and if they do so, they face very heavy punishments.
در ماه گذشته یک مسلمان که تغییر دین داده بود و مسیحی شده بود به نام آقای ندرخانی حکم اعدامش صادر شد.
Last month, a Muslim who had converted to Christianity, and his name is Mr. Nadar Khani, was sentenced to death.
از این حکم درخواست تجدید نظر کرد و دادگاه تجدید نظر گفت 3 روز مهلت داری که توبه کنی و به دین اسلام برگردی.
He appealed against that judgment, but the appeal court gave him 3 days and said, you have 3 days to repent. Otherwise, your sentence will not be reconsidered.
ندرخانی حاضر نشد توبه بکنه و الان در خطر اعدامه و همه ایرانی ها سعی میکنن که اعتراض بکنن به این حکم غیر عادلانه.
Mr. Nadar Khani refused to repent and become a Muslim again, so he remains on death row, and all Iranians are appealing to the world to help reverse that judgment.
موارد تبعیض بر اساس مذهب بسیار بیش از این هاست، اما متاسفانه وقت ما کمه.
There are many more instances of religious-based discrimination, but sadly we have very little time to delve into them.
امروز درست روز جهانی کودکه، یعنی روزی است که کنوانسیون بین المللی حقوق کودک تصویب شد و دولت ایران هم به این کنوانسیون ملحق شده.
Today coincides with the International Day for Children, and which is also the day, the anniversary of the date, the Convention on the Right of the Child was endorsed, to which the Iranian government is also a signatory.
متاسفانه سن مسئولیت کیفری در ایران بسیار پایینه، 9 سال برای دختر و 15 سال برای پسر.
Unfortunately, the age of criminal responsibility in Iran is very low. It's 9 for girls and 15 for boys.
یعنی اگر یک دختر 10 ساله یا یک پسر 16 ساله مرتکب جرمی بشوند، قانون اونها رو به همان شدت مجازات می‌کند که اگر یک فردی 40 ساله مرتکب شده بود.
In other words, if a 10-year-old girl or a 16-year-old boy perpetrate a crime, the punishment for them would be the same punishment as a man of 40 would be sentenced to.
و بر همین اساس متاسفانه ما اعدام مجرمین کمتر از 18 سال رو در ایران داریم و باید بگم که ایران بیشترین اعدام کننده خردسالان در جهانه.
And sadly, because of that, unfortunately, we have juvenile executions, execution of children under the age of 18 in Iran. And Iran is, in fact, has the highest number of juvenile executions in the world.
10 روز قبل یک پسر 17 ساله رو که در یک دعوا کسی رو کشته بود، در خیابان، در ملأ عام اعدامش کردند.
10 days ago, they hanged a 17-year-old boy who had accidentally stabbed someone to death in the course of a quarrel. This young man was executed, was hanged in public on a street.
این پسر 17 ساله در یک دعوا ضربه‌ای به کسی زده بود که باعث مرگش شده بود. قصد قبلی قتل نداشت، مقتول رو نمیشناخت، دشمنی با هم نداشتن، صرفاً در یک دعوا و بدون قصد قبلی باعث مرگ کسی شده بود.
This 17-year-old boy did not know the victim. It was an accident that happened in the course of a quarrel. It wasn't a case of premeditated murder. It was just a manslaughter. It was an accident.
و تقریباً 5 ماه قبل هم 2 جوان به جرم همجنسگرایی اعدام شدند.
And again, some 5 months ago, 2 young men were executed on charge of homosexuality.
وضعیت زنان همان گونه که گفتم در ایران بسیار تبعیض‌آمیزه که من چند موردش رو به عنوان مثال میگم.
The predicament of women in Iran, as I mentioned earlier, is also very discriminatory, and I'm going to highlight a few instances.
به موجب قانون ارزش جان زن نیمی از ارزش جان مرده، یعنی اگه زن و مردی با هم برن تو خیابون با اتومبیل تصادف کنن، خسارتی که به زن میدن نصف چیزی است که به مرد تعلق میگیره.
Based on Iranian law, the value of a woman's life is half that of a man. For instance, if a man and a woman happen to be walking along the street and they're hit by a car, the compensation awarded to the man would be twice as much as that awarded to the woman.
شهادت 2 زن معادل با شهادت یک مرد در دادگاه.
The testimony of 2 women is tantamount to the testimony of 1 man in a court of law.
یه مرد میتواند 4 همسر بگیرد بدون عذر موجه، زنش رو طلاق بده، اما طلاق گرفتن برای زن بسیار دشواره.
A man can have up to 4 wives and he can divorce them without any excuse, whereas for women it is almost impossible to apply for divorce.
تمام این قوانینی که راجع به در خصوص ایران به شما گفتم قوانینی است که بعد از انقلاب 1979 در ایران به تصویب رسید.
All these laws that I have mentioned are laws that were endorsed after the 1979 revolution in Iran.
و اما توجیه حکومت ایران و برخی از رادیکال هایی که در قیام های مردمی اخیراً به قدرت رسیدند برای این گونه قوانین چیست؟
Now, how does the Iranian government and how do these radicals who in these recent uprisings have come to power justify these laws?
اینا ادعا میکنند که این قوانین ناشی از اسلامه و چون مردم مسلمانان دیگه باید این قوانین رو اجرا بکنن.
They allege that all these laws emanate from Islam and because the people are Muslims, they must abide by them.
برای جلوگیری از این وضع طبیعتاً اولین قدم این است که مذهب و ایدئولوژی از حکومت جدا بشه تا دولت مردان از اعتقادات مذهبی مردم سوء استفاده نکنن.
Naturally, to prevent such a situation, it would be best for religion and ideology to be separated from politics so that politicians don't exploit people's sentiments.
این شرط لازمه ولی کن کافی نیست.
Yes, this is a condition that is necessary, but it's not enough.
برای اینکه یادمون نره که در خیلی از نقاط دنیا که حکومت اسلامی نیست باز هم زنان وضعیت نامساعدی دارن.
Because you mustn't forget that there are countries in the world that are not Islamic, yet women's situation is not any better.
به عنوان مثال میتوانم سوریه رو نام ببرم که زیربنای عقیدتی حزب بعث حاکم بر سوریه که نزدیک به نیم قرن بابای مردم داره در میاره زیربناش اصولا سوسیالیسمه نه اسلام.
For example, I'm going to highlight the case of Syria because ideologically the Syrian government has followed the Ba'athist rule and for many years the Ba'athist regime has been giving people hell and the ideology of this Ba'athist regime is socialism.
بنابراین ما در اینجا به یک عنصر فرهنگی برمیخوریم یعنی فرهنگ پدرسالار.
So here we come across a cultural issue which is that of a patriarchal culture.
فرهنگ پدرسالار از هر شیوهی برای توجیه خودش استفاده میکنه حتی از مذهب.
A patriarchal culture uses any means to justify its conduct, including religion.
فرهنگ پدرسالار چون برابری انسانها رو قبول نداره در خانه به زن و در اجتماع به زن و مرد هر دوتا ستم میکنه برای اینکه اصولاً برابری رو قبول نداره.
A patriarchal culture, because it doesn't believe in equality at home, it represses women, and outside home, it represses both men and women, because it just doesn't believe in rights and equality.
و توجه داشته باشید من وقتی که صحبت از فرهنگ پدرسالار میکنم منظورم جنس مذکر نیست، منظورم یک فرهنگ غلط قبیله‌ای است.
And please bear in mind that when I mention a patriarchal culture, I'm not necessarily referring to a culture promoted by men. I'm talking about a tribal culture, which is totally wrong.
زنان خود هرچند قربانیان این فرهنگ غلط هستند اما متاسفانه حامل این فرهنگ غلط هم هستند. یادمون باشه هر مرد زورگویی به هر حال در دامن یک زن یعنی مادر تربیت شده.
Women, although they are victims of this patriarchal culture, they're also carriers of this culture as well, because don't forget that every man is raised by a woman.
من فرهنگ پدرسالار رو تشبیه می‌کنم به بیماری هموفیلی.
I compare this patriarchal culture to hemophilia.
هموفیلی یک بیماری ژنتیکیه که در اون خونریزی بند نمیاد، یعنی یک زخم کوچک میتواند خونریزی زیادی به بار بیاره.
Hemophilia is a genetic condition. It's a blood disease that a small cut can result in heavy bleeding that cannot be stopped.
زنها حامل این ژن هستند.
It's women who are the carriers of this gene.
یعنی زنی که این ژن بیمار رو داره خودش مبتلا به بیماری نیست، خودش مریض نیست، اما اولاد پسرش مبتلا میشه، مریض میشه و اولاد دخترش مبتلا نمیشه.
That means that a woman who has this hemophilia gene, she doesn't suffer from it herself, but she passes it on to her sons. Her daughters are not affected, they only carry it to their sons, but the sons are affected.
فرهنگ پدرسالارم به همین شیوه عمل میکنه. زنها قربانی هستن اما در این حال تولید کننده این فرهنگ هم میتونن باشن.
And the patriarchal culture works in the same way. Women are victims at the same time. They are creators of this disease as well.
بنابراین مهمترین مسئله آموزش و توانمند کردن زنانه.
Therefore, it is imperative to have training and to empower women.
یکی از شیوه‌های توانمندسازی زنان این است که زنان مسلمان رو با اسلام درست آشنا بکنیم تا یاد بگیرن و بدانن که آن ظلمی که بر آنها می رود به خاطر اسلام نیست بلکه به خاطر تفسیر غلط از اسلامه.
One way of empowering these women is to teach them the correct version of Islam so that they know that the oppression they are suffering is not because of Islam, but it's because of the wrong interpretation of Islam.
و از همین رو تعدادی از روشنفکران مدرن در کشورهای اسلامی ایجاد شدند که اینها معتقدند اسلام با حقوق بشر و دموکراسی میتواند سازگاری داشته باشد و حکومت‌ها از اسلام سوء استفاده میکنند برای اینکه به مردم ستم کنند.
That is why there are now some moderate Islamic intellectuals, and they are saying that Islam, the true Islam, is in fact compatible with human rights and with democracy, and it's the governments that are abusing Islam in order to suppress their people.
اینها معتقدند که قوانین اسلام اصولاً بر دو دست است. یک قوانینی که رابطه شخص رو با خداوند تعیین میکنه.
They believe that Islamic laws are actually divided into two categories. One is about the relationship between a person and his or her own God.
این دست از قوانین غیر قابل تغییر هستند و تا زمانی که کسی خودش رو مسلمان می‌داند باید این قوانین رو اجرا بکنه، مثل نماز خواندن، روزه گرفتن.
This category of laws, they are fixed. They cannot be changed. And instances of it are the daily prayers or fasting, and a Muslim must abide by them.
اما هیچ کس و هیچ حکومتی حق ندارد به خاطر عدم اجرای این قوانین کسی رو مورد مؤاخذه یا مجازات قرار بده.
But no government has the right to question anyone or to punish them for failing to implement these laws.
مثل کلیسا رفتن مسیحیان که کسی که خودش رو مسیحی میدونه میره کلیسا، اما اگه کسی نره حکومت حق نداره مردم رو مجازات بکنه که چرا کلیسا نمیرین.
Just the same as in Christianity, some people like to go to church, some don't. And those who don't go to church, no government has a right to say to them, you must go to church.
و دسته دوم از قوانین قوانینی است که رابطه افراد رو در اجتماع تنظیم میکنه.
And the second category of laws pertains to the relationship of people in society, and it regulates how people should act within their society.
این دسته از قوانین بر حسب مقتضیات زمان و مکان قابل تغییرند، اما روح کلی قانون باید حفظ بشه.
These set of laws, they can change according to the needs and exigencies of the time and the place, but they must try and hold on to the spirit of the law.
به عنوان مثال مجازات دزدی رو البته با شرایطی در قرآن نوشتن قطع دسته.
For example, the punishment for theft, they say according to the Quran, is amputation of a hand.
در اون زمان زندان نبود و دست دزد رو در همه جا در اروپا هم قطع می‌کردن یا مجازاتی شبیه این مجازات‌های بدنی برای دزد در نظر گرفته می‌شد.
In those early Islamic days, the punishment for theft was to cut off the thief's hand. It wasn't just exclusive to Islamic countries. They did that in some non-Islamic countries, or similar corporal punishments.
اما الان نوع مجازات عوض شده و ما بایستی مطابق با زمان یک سارق رو مجازات کنیم.
But now the types of punishments have changed, and we have to move with the times, and we have to hand down punishments that are compatible with the times.